The rain hammered against the windshield like 1,000 angry fists pounding against my chest, each drop a reminder of the emptiness that had consumed my life for the past 4 years. The thunder cracked overhead, splitting the gray Oregon sky the same way my heart had been split that terrible day in June 2020. I sat in my truck outside the cemetery, engine running, wipers fighting a losing battle against the storm, and I wondered for the 1,000th time where I had gone wrong. My name is Robert Hayes. I'm 64 years old now, though I feel closer to 100. I spent 30 years running into burning buildings, saving lives, being the hero, but I couldn't save the one person who mattered most. My daughter, Sarah, my only child, gone without a trace on what should have been the happiest day of her life. Let me take you back to that day, June 13th, 2020, the kind of sunny Saturday that tricks you into believing everything will turn out fine. The kind of day that makes you forget the world can be cruel. I stood in the church vestibule, adjusting my tie for the 100th time. Sarah was supposed to be in the bridal suite upstairs, getting ready with her bridesmaids. I was supposed to walk her down the aisle in 20 minutes. Instead, I was standing there listening to her maid of honor, Jessica, explain through tears that Sarah had vanished. "What do you mean she's gone?" I asked, my throat suddenly dry. "She went to get something from her car an hour ago," Jessica sobbed. "She never came back. Her phone's going straight to voicemail. Robert, her car is still in the parking lot, but she's nowhere." The next hours blurred together like scenes from someone else's nightmare. Police, questions, search dogs. 200 wedding guests standing around in their Sunday best, whispering behind their hands. And David Morrison, my daughter's fiancé, his perfect face twisted in what I now know was not grief, but calculation. David's mother, Elizabeth Morrison, a woman who always looked at me like I was dirt, she'd stepped in, took charge immediately. "Officers, you need to understand," she told the police, her voice dripping with concern that I now recognize as performance. "Sarah has been under tremendous stress, planning a wedding, her father's. Well, his drinking problem. Robert, you drove her away with your behavior." I wanted to scream. I hadn't touched alcohol in 15 years, not since Sarah was a teenager and made me promise. But Elizabeth was rich, connected, persuasive, and I was just a retired firefighter with calloused hands and a working-class address. The police investigated for 6 months. They found nothing. No body, no evidence of foul play, no witnesses. Sarah's bank account hadn't been touched. Her apartment sat untouched, rent paid up by David, who claimed he was keeping it for when she comes back. The case went cold. The official theory became that Sarah had gotten cold feet and run away to start over somewhere new. I knew better. My daughter wouldn't do that. Sarah had been excited about the wedding. She'd called me 2 nights before, laughing about some mix-up with the flowers. She'd said, "Dad, I can't wait for you to walk me down the aisle." Those were the last words she ever said to me. After the search ended, I fell apart. My wife, Sarah's mother, had died of cancer when Sarah was 10. Sarah was all I had left. I sold my house because every corner reminded me of her. The kitchen where we'd made pancakes every Sunday. The garage where I'd taught her to change oil. The backyard where we'd planted a cherry tree when she graduated college. I moved into a small apartment in southeast Portland, barely furnished, barely living. My pension covered the bills, but just barely. I'd given most of my savings to private investigators who all came up empty. The Morrison family had suggested I was harassing them when I kept asking questions. I was financially drained, emotionally destroyed, and completely alone, until that day 4 years later, November 2024, when Marcus Chen showed up at my door. I didn't recognize him at first. A man in an expensive suit, holding a leather briefcase, standing in the hallway of my rundown apartment building. He looked out of place, like a diamond in a coal bin. "Mr. Hayes?" he asked. "Robert Hayes?" "Depends who's asking," I said, one hand on the door, ready to close it. I'd learned to be suspicious of well-dressed strangers. "My name is Marcus Chen. I was Sarah's friend in college. We studied together, stayed in touch. Mr. Hayes, I need to talk to you about your daughter. I think I know what happened to her." My heart stopped. In 4 years, I'd heard a dozen theories, 100 false leads, and nothing had come close to the truth. But something in Marcus's eyes made me step aside and let him in. He sat on my worn couch and pulled out a folder. "I need you to understand something first," Marcus said. "I'm a lawyer now, corporate law, boring stuff mostly. But I never forgot about Sarah. When she disappeared, something didn't sit right with me. David Morrison always seemed off. Too smooth, too perfect, too eager to move on." "The police cleared him," I said, though the words tasted bitter. "The police investigated for 6 months and had nothing to go on," Marcus corrected. "But I had something they didn't. Persistence. And time, Mr. Hayes. I've spent 4 years digging into David Morrison's life. What I found is going to sound impossible, but I need you to hear me out." He opened the folder and showed me documents. Bank statements, email printouts, photos. As I read, the room seemed to tilt. David Morrison wasn't a successful real estate developer like he'd claimed. He was the front man for an insurance fraud operation. His mother, Elizabeth, ran it. They'd been staging accidents, filing false claims, collecting millions. They had a network of doctors who'd write fake medical reports, body shops that would damage cars deliberately, even a crematorium owner who'd provide fake death certificates. "Sarah found out," Marcus said quietly. "She worked as a teacher, but she was also doing bookkeeping on the side to save money for the wedding. David hired her to organize some files for his business. She was good with numbers, Robert, too good. She saw the discrepancies." He showed me a printout of text messages, recovered from Sarah's cloud backup that Marcus had somehow accessed. Messages from 3 days before the wedding. Sarah to her college roommate. "I found something at David's office. Financial records that don't make sense. Claims for accidents that never happened. I think David's involved in fraud. I don't know what to do." Roommate. "You need to tell someone." Police? Sarah. "I need to be sure first. I'm going to talk to David tonight." That was the last message Sarah ever sent. "They couldn't let her expose them," Marcus said. "The wedding was in 3 days. If she'd gone to the police, if she'd called it off and explained why, everything would have unraveled. Elizabeth Morrison has connections everywhere, Robert. Police, judges, city council. They needed Sarah to disappear in a way that wouldn't point back to them." "Where is she?" My voice came out as a whisper. "Is she alive?" Marcus met my eyes. "I don't know, but I have a lead. There's a property in Astoria, Oregon, right on the coast. It's owned by a shell company, but I traced it back to Elizabeth Morrison. The property taxes are paid, utilities are active, but nobody officially lives there. Robert, I think that's where they're keeping her." "Keeping her? You mean she's alive?" Hope and terror warred in my chest. "I think so. If they'd killed her, they would have needed a body to dispose of. Too risky. But if they're keeping her somewhere remote, somewhere no one would think to look, they could claim she ran away and they'd be in the clear. They probably told her that if she cooperates, stays quiet, they won't hurt her family, won't hurt you." I was already standing, reaching for my jacket. 4 years of grief were crystallizing into something harder, something like rage. "We need to call the police," Marcus said, but his tone suggested he knew that wasn't going to work. "You said Elizabeth has connections. Who's going to believe us? You have theories and circumstantial evidence. I'm a grief-stricken father who everyone thinks drove his daughter away. We need proof, Marcus. We need to find her ourselves." Marcus stood too. "I was hoping you'd say that. But Robert, we have to be smart about this. If we go rushing in and we're wrong, or if they catch us, they could move her. Or worse, then we don't get caught. You might be wondering where I got the courage, the strength, to do what came next. Let me be clear about something. I was 64 years old. I had a bad knee from a warehouse fire back in 1998, and I needed reading glasses to see the newspaper. I wasn't some action hero. I was a retired firefighter living on a pension in a studio apartment. But I was also a father who'd spent 4 years believing his daughter was dead or gone forever, and now I had hope. Terrible, beautiful hope. The kind of hope that makes you capable of things you never thought possible. We planned carefully. Marcus used his legal resources to pull records on the Astoria property. It was an old fish processing warehouse, converted into what the records called storage. It sat on a peninsula, isolated, surrounded by water on 3 sides. The perfect place to keep someone hidden. "We need to get eyes on it first," Marcus said. We were sitting in his car outside my apartment, the Portland rain drumming on the roof. "We can't just break in. We need to know if Sarah's really there, what kind of security they have, how many people." So we drove to Astoria. It took 2 hours up the coast highway, past Seaside and Cannon Beach, beautiful Oregon coastline that I couldn't appreciate because my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Marcus had equipment in his trunk, binoculars, a camera with a telephoto lens. He'd thought of everything. We parked half a mile away and hiked through the woods to get a vantage point. The warehouse sat gray and weathered against the November sky, waves crashing behind it. There were lights on inside, a car parked out front, a black SUV with tinted windows. We watched for 3 hours. At 4 p.m., as the light was failing, a door opened. A man came out, middle-aged, thick build. He lit a cigarette and stood there smoking, looking at his phone. Then he called back inside. "I'm heading to town for supplies. You need anything?" A woman's voice answered from inside, but I couldn't make out the words. The man got in the SUV and drove away. "This is our chance," I said. "1 guard, maybe 2. Marcus, we might not get another opportunity. Robert, we should call the police. We have proof someone's in there. And if it's not Sarah, if it's just storage like the records say, we'll look like crazy people and they'll move her if she is here. Marcus, please, I have to know." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Okay, but we do this smart. In and out, just reconnaissance. If we find her, then we call the police." We waited until dark. The warehouse had a few exterior lights, but the area around it was shadows and overgrown grass. We approached from the water side, where thick brush gave us cover. Up close, I could see the building was bigger than I'd thought. 2 stories, multiple rooms, barred windows on the 2nd floor. Barred windows. What kind of storage facility needs barred windows? Marcus found a door on the east side, old and weathered. He pulled out a set of lockpicks. "Don't ask," he said when he saw my expression. "I had a different life before law school." The lock clicked open. We slipped inside into darkness. I pulled out the flashlight Marcus had given me, keeping the beam low. We were in a long hallway, concrete floors, the smell of salt and mildew thick in the air. Doors lined both sides, all closed. We moved quietly, checking each room. Storage, just like the records said. Old furniture, boxes, nothing suspicious. We reached a stairwell and climbed to the 2nd floor. That's when I heard it. A sound that made my blood freeze and my heart race simultaneously. A cough. Human. Female. Coming from a room at the end of the hallway. I moved toward it, Marcus hissing behind me to slow down, but I couldn't. The door was heavy, metal, with a serious deadbolt on the outside. A deadbolt that was locked. "Sarah?" I called through the door, my voice cracking. "Sarah, baby, is that you?" Silence. Then, so quiet I almost missed it. "Dad?" My hands shook so badly I could barely work the deadbolt. Marcus had to help me. The lock slid back, and I shoved the door open. The room was small, maybe 10 by 12. There was a cot, a small table, a chair. A single bulb hung from the ceiling. And there, standing in the middle of the room, thin and pale, and staring at me like I was a ghost, was my daughter, Sarah. I couldn't say anything else. I crossed the room and pulled her into my arms, and she was real, solid, alive. She was sobbing, and so was I. And Marcus was saying something about needing to move, needing to get out. But for just a moment, I didn't care about anything, except that I was holding my daughter after 4 years of believing I never would again. "Dad, how did you find me?" Sarah was crying, laughing, her hands gripping my jacket like she'd never let go. I thought they told you I ran away. I thought you hated me for leaving." "Never," I said. "Never, baby. I knew you wouldn't run. I've been looking for you. We've been looking. We need to go," Marcus said urgently. "Now." Before the guard comes back, Sarah pulled back, her eyes wide with fear. Wait, you don't understand. It's not just one guard. David's mother, Elizabeth, she has people everywhere. If we run, if they catch us, she'll kill you both. She told me if I ever tried to escape, she'd hurt you, Dad. That's the only reason I stayed. How many guards? Marcus asked. All business. Usually 2. Frank went to town. But there's another one downstairs, Jerry. He's armed. And Dad, there's something else you need to know. This isn't just about hiding me. They're using this place, the warehouse. It's part of their operation. They stage accidents here, store evidence, everything. If you expose me being here, you expose everything. Elizabeth will kill us all, rather than let that happen. The sound of a car engine outside made us all freeze. Through the barred window, I could see headlights sweeping across the parking area. That's Frank, Sarah whispered. He's back early. We were trapped. Second floor of a warehouse, one exit we knew about, and armed guards who wouldn't hesitate to kill us all to protect Elizabeth Morrison's empire. I'd survived 30 years of firefighting, pulled people from collapsing buildings, run through walls of flame, but I'd never been as scared as I was in that moment. Marcus's phone buzzed. He looked at it, and his face went pale. We have a bigger problem. I set up an alert for David Morrison's name. Robert, there's a police scanner report. David just reported a break-in at one of his properties in Astoria. He's claiming intruders, possibly armed. Police are en route. He knows we're here, I said. Elizabeth must have someone watching the property. They're setting us up. We'll look like criminals. Sarah will claim we kidnapped her because they've had 4 years to break her down, and we'll all end up in prison while they walk free. Then we need evidence, Marcus said. He was already moving, pulling out his phone. Sarah, where do they keep the files? The records for the fraud operation? Downstairs. Office in the back. But Jerry's down there. Can you get to the office without Jerry seeing you? Sarah nodded slowly. I've been here 4 years. I know this place. There's a back way. But Dad, what are you planning? Marcus was typing furiously on his phone. I'm uploading everything to my secure cloud server. If we can get those files, photograph them, upload them before the police arrive, it won't matter what Elizabeth claims. The evidence will be out there. And I'm sending a message to a journalist friend at the Oregonian. If anything happens to us, she'll know where to look. It was a desperate plan, but it was all we had. I'll distract Jerry, I said. Sarah, you get the files. Marcus, you upload. We have maybe 10 minutes before the police arrive. I didn't wait for arguments. I was already moving down the stairs. I could hear Jerry downstairs, talking on his phone. Yeah, boss. I got it. Nobody gets out. I stepped into the main floor and cleared my throat. Jerry spun around, a big man with a gun already in his hand. FBI, I lied, pulling out my wallet and flashing it too quickly to see. We have a warrant for this property. I need you to put the weapon down. It was a terrible lie, and Jerry didn't buy it for a second. But it confused him just long enough. He hesitated, squinting at me in the dim light. You're not FBI. You're that girl's father. Elizabeth said you might show up. He raised the gun, and I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed a metal folding chair leaning against the wall and threw it at him. It hit him in the chest, and he stumbled backward, the gun going off with a deafening crack. The bullet went wide, hitting the wall somewhere behind me. I charged him. 64 years old with a bad knee. But 30 years of firefighter training doesn't just disappear. I hit him low, driving my shoulder into his gut, and we both went down. The gun skittered across the floor. We fought like animals. He was younger, bigger, but I was fighting for my daughter. I got my arm around his throat, a chokehold I'd learned in academy training decades ago. He thrashed and clawed, but I held on, until finally he went limp. I didn't kill him. I could feel his pulse, but he'd be out for a while. Sarah appeared from the back office, her arms full of folders and an external hard drive. Got them. Everything. 4 years of records. Marcus was already photographing pages, his fingers flying across his phone screen. Almost done. Just need 2 more minutes. That's when we heard sirens outside. Multiple vehicles. The The police were here. Out the back, Sarah said. There's a dock. It leads to the water. If we can get to the woods. The front door crashed open. Police! Show yourselves! We ran. Through the back hallway, Sarah leading the way, Marcus still uploading files as he ran. We burst out onto a wooden dock that extended over the water. The rain had started again. Cold November rain that felt like needles against my skin. Behind us, flashlights. Shouting, "Stop! Police!" We reached the end of the dock and I looked down. Dark water, at least a 15-foot drop. I couldn't swim well, never could. One of those irrational fears I'd carried my whole life. "Dad, we have to jump," Sarah said. I looked at my daughter. I'd lost her once. I wasn't losing her again. I jumped. The water was so cold it felt like being electrocuted. I went under, the weight of my clothes dragging me down. I couldn't see, couldn't breathe, and for a moment I thought this was it. 4 years searching for my daughter, finding her, only to drown in the Astoria harbor. Then hands grabbed me. Sarah on one side, Marcus on the other, pulling me up. We surfaced, gasping. The police were on the dock above us, but they weren't shooting. They were confused, trying to figure out what was happening. We swam for the shore, or rather Sarah and Marcus pulled me while I tried not to drown. We reached the rocky beach and collapsed, coughing up salt water. Upload finished, Marcus gasped, holding up his phone. Everything's on my server. The journalist has been notified. Robert, we did it, but we weren't safe yet. Police were coming around the building, flashlight beams cutting through the rain. We ran for the woods, soaking wet, freezing, but together. We made it to Marcus's car. Somehow. He drove, heat blasting, while Sarah and I sat in the back, holding each other. She told me everything. How David had confronted her when she'd asked about the files. How Elizabeth had decided they couldn't risk her going to the police. How they'd drugged her at the wedding venue, told everyone she'd run away, and kept her in that warehouse for 4 years. They told me you were better off without me, Sarah sobbed. They showed me fake newspaper articles about you moving on, dating someone new. They said if I escaped, they'd frame you for my kidnapping. I stayed because I thought I was protecting you. You were protecting me, I said. But you never had to. I would have burned the world down to find you. Marcus drove us to Portland, to the police headquarters downtown. We walked in, still dripping wet, and asked for the detective division. A young officer tried to turn us away until Marcus dropped a folder on the desk. My name is Marcus Chen. I'm an attorney. This is Robert Hayes and his daughter Sarah Hayes. Sarah was reported missing 4 years ago. She was kidnapped and held prisoner by David Morrison and Elizabeth Morrison as part of an insurance fraud conspiracy. We have evidence. All of it. And you're going to want to see this before the Astoria PD finishes processing the scene we just came from. It took 6 hours to tell the whole story. Detectives, FBI agents, district attorneys. They wanted every detail. Marcus's evidence was solid. 4 years of fraud, documented in Elizabeth Morrison's own files. Insurance claims in the millions. Staged accidents. Bribed officials. And at the center of it all, my daughter, held prisoner because she'd discovered the truth. By morning, the arrests had started. David Morrison was picked up at his luxury condo. Elizabeth Morrison tried to run, but they caught her at the airport. A dozen others involved in the fraud ring. The news was calling it the biggest insurance fraud case in Oregon history. Sarah stayed at my apartment. We ordered takeout and barely touched it, too exhausted to eat, too wired to sleep. She looked around the tiny studio with its bare walls and second-hand furniture. Dad, you sold the house. I couldn't stay there without you. I'm so sorry. For everything you went through. Don't you dare apologize, I said. You survived 4 years in captivity. You stayed strong because you thought you were protecting me. Sarah, you have nothing to be sorry for. She leaned against my shoulder like she used to when she was little. What happens now? Now you heal. We both heal. We testify at the trials. We make sure David and Elizabeth spend the rest of their lives in prison. And then we figure out the rest. Together. Can we get the house back? I laughed. Actually laughed. For the first time in 4 years. Probably not. I sold it pretty cheap. but we can find a new one with a yard for a cherry tree. The trials took months. David Morrison got 25 years for kidnapping, conspiracy, and fraud. Elizabeth Morrison got 30. Dozens of others in their network went to prison. The insurance companies they'd defrauded sued for millions. Everything the Morrisons had built came crashing down. Sarah started therapy. So did I. We both had a long road ahead. She'd lost 4 years of her life. I'd lost 4 years believing she was gone. But we had each other and Marcus, who'd become family through all of this. He gave up corporate law to work with the FBI on fraud cases. He said Sarah had shown him what really mattered. About a year after that November night, Sarah and I did buy a house. Nothing fancy, just a small place in northeast Portland with a yard. We planted a cherry tree together. She went back to teaching, though it took time to rebuild her confidence. I started volunteering at the fire department, training new recruits, finding purpose again. I'm 65 now. Sarah is 33. We have dinner together twice a week, and she calls me every day. Some of my old firefighter buddies ask me how I did it, how I never gave up, how I found her when everyone else had stopped looking. The truth is simpler than they think. I'm not a hero. I'm just a father who loved his daughter. And sometimes, love is stronger than any conspiracy, any crime, any amount of money or power. Sometimes, love is enough to burn through 4 years of darkness and bring someone home. I think about that night in the warehouse often. The fear, the desperation, the moment I saw Sarah's face after so long. I think about the cold water of the harbor and how certain I was that I would drown. But I also think about what came after. The healing, the justice, the second chance we got that so few people receive. David Morrison's mother once told the police I was nothing but a washed-up firefighter with delusions. She was wrong about one thing. I wasn't washed up. I was a father, and there's no force on earth stronger than that. If you remember nothing else from my story, remember this. Never give up on the people you love. Never accept the easy explanations, and never underestimate what a parent will do to save their child. Because in the end, that love is what won. Not money, not power, not connections. Just love. And it was enough.